In this fourth episode, I speak with a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, LGBTQ+, self-identifying, queer middle school teacher, Milo, who, before the podcast, told me their pronouns were they, them. Milo discussed the uphill battle that arts programs currently face due to limited funding and how this can create deep inequities in student participation. They shared strategies for encouraging respectful, critical conversations in class without crossing professional boundaries on personal political views. And throughout the interview, Milo expressed a desire to maintain joy and community in music education, even as educational policy shifts around them. There were 4 big takeaways from their conversation: equity in arts education, addressing politics in the classroom, creating safe spaces for their students, and teacher morale and burnout. It's a real thing. There's concern about the mental toll of teaching during these politically volatile times. It's time for band class, and it's time for red pens and red flags. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Red Pens and Red Flags, the podcast that's not afraid to grade the current state of American education. My name is Rictor Riolo, a grad student knee-deep in the world of teaching, technology, and just trying to stay out of suspension. Today, I'm joined by
Milo.
Welcome to the podcast, Milo.
Thank you very much.
Can you describe your current role in education, where you teach, this kind of school?
So I am a middle school band director, and I connect to all of those things on the daily, specifically in regards to things like funding, like equitable funding for my program and making sure we have everything we need. And one of the struggles we face a lot is getting the instruments like cleaned and in good playing condition so that other students are able to use them. And we often don't have a lot of funding to that. So students don't have access to instruments, which means they are required to go out and rent one. And so it does not create equitable access for my students. And that's just the biggest way we face those things in my classroom.
Being that you are in public education and we are currently living in unprecedented times, have you ever had any politically charged topics pop up in class or with teachers or colleagues?
100%. Yeah. Yes. I always, at least with my students, I do try to give them the opportunity to have a safe place to have these discussions. And it's especially difficult because as an educator, I'm not allowed to talk very much about my opinion and my stance on things, but I can give them ways to have discussions that are safe and that are done in a way that allows everyone to have their voice heard. And I think that's really important that students understand how to think critically and have these critical conversations, because it just makes them better humans in general. And it allows them to be able to communicate more efficiently. And if they feel safe to do that, then they are more open to learning from others, which is really important to me. And then I've often have situations where I'm dealing with maybe not so much political issues like so forthright, but definitely issues like social issues, like calling people by their correct pronouns, or like, why does such and such have to do with race? Why is that relevant? Things like that. And so just explaining how all of these things are interconnected and the intersectionality of what we do, that kind of conversation comes up a lot more than politics do.
With the shuttering of the Department of Education, by giving power back to the states, how do you think that's going to handle public education? What positives and negatives do you foresee?
That's such a tough question because I feel like it's such a double-edged sword. In so many ways, I have a reasonable amount of faith in our state to make decent decisions based on what we've done in the past. And like the values that we uphold, like being able to talk about DEI in schools is a state initiative. And I'm really thankful that we live in a place where that is allowed, which is crazy that I have to even say that. But the things that I'm scared of most are like big things like funding. And I wonder if things do go to, I'm going to use air quotes, state control, I wonder how much control exactly states would actually have. So even though I feel this weird sense of like comfort living in Oregon, I also worry that so much is unknown and we don't know what this administration is going to do or require of states, like that overarching umbrella. That unknown fear is really, really looming and daunting.
Do you believe all students, regardless of race, income, or zip code, will receive the same quality of education if states hold more power?
I think my ideal answer is absolutely, because we would have a more focused look at what our state needs and we could allocate funds more accurately towards what serves our populations the best. Realistically, I do not think that will actually happen. And historically, I don't think that has ever happened. Do you remember Jim Crow?
You're a band teacher. If your position is terminated due to budget cuts because of the Department of Education being shuttered, then what? What will you do?
That's an awesome question.
Let me add to that.
Yeah.
You're in the union. You're guaranteed a job. Where would you see yourself?
I have to be honest. I don't think this, and it's just for me personally, this is no offense to anyone else. The band room is where I belong. And I do not think that I could survive teaching in another classroom. It is definitely a worry that that's something that is going to be presented to me. However, I do not have fear of change. I will be fine, honestly, if I get removed from this job. And if they offer me a classroom position, I think I'd be like, no thanks, and move on. And then my work would go more towards like nonprofits and fighting for education and fighting for the arts to come back. Because I'm also really active in my professional organizations. Like I'm the president of our local Oregon Music Educators chapter. And something we're working on a lot as a state is advocacy. And like we have a lobbyist now for music education. So I think that's where I would put my time and energy. If I can't be in the band room, I would be fighting to get those band rooms back.
Are you familiar with Project 2025? If so, what are your initial reactions or concerns?
I think, I'll tell you, the first time that I heard about it, I honestly thought that like it was sort of comical. Like there's no way that people actually believe this. And then when I start hearing that like there are senators and representatives that are like for it and are pushing to like promoting it, I was shocked that other people actually could back something like this, specifically in regards to like education and being someone who is queer and non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. Just knowing that that's something I would not be allowed to do as an educator would absolutely crush my soul, because I know that there are students who have never seen a queer, non-binary, completely out educator before. And it's not something that I saw. And so I know how important it is to be that person for others. And so the fact that I would have to hide my identity, my students would have to hide their identity, is incredibly concerning. And then, of course, I think of my students who have immigrated to this country and may not be legal citizens, but still contribute to our infrastructure and to our community. And the fact that their contributions are not valued and that they could just be taken out at any point out of the country is terrifying. And it's also incredibly belittling to the contributions that they make. They're the backbone of this country.
To double back on this, I want to give you some information and I want your thoughts.
Okay.
Oklahoma has mandated that Bibles are put in all their classrooms. Louisiana has the 10 Commandments in their classrooms. And the great state of Texas is now incorporating Bible stories in elementary education. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
All right. Oh my God. Am I allowed to just like be totally straight up about my feelings?
Milo, no one knows who you are.
Okay, sweet. All right. I have to tell you, as the Bible as a literary element, I am 100% in support of. You want to study the Bible and you want to study the words in it and you want to dissect the meaning and things like that? Absolutely. That's literature. Absolutely. But requiring it to be posted in classrooms, requiring Bibles to be in the room and using it not just as a text, but as a teaching is the part that's really, really messed up. This is supposed to be, again, I say this 1,000 times, a safe place for students to explore different things, to be themselves and not feel oppressed by things that are in their classroom. And oftentimes, I think of, again, myself as a student, like a young queer student, would feel incredibly unsafe in a classroom where there are religious materials. And that has been a reality for me before, being in other people's classrooms. And also the fact that not everyone believes in the Bible. There are other religions that are out there. And again, that's just another way that students could feel unsafe to be practicing their religion. And like, what if they need to go pray midday because that's what happens for them? Like, and that's their truth. Then that's what they need to do. And they might not be welcome to do that in a place that's just promoting one certain thing.
You mentioned that you're queer. What are your thoughts on DEI in the professional educational landscape and classrooms?
I think it's a requirement. I don't understand how DEI is used as like such a weaponized phrase of negativity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, you do not want that, is what you're saying. How do we take that out of a classroom? How do I make accommodations for my students on IEP? How do I make accommodations for students who are on 504s or behavioral plans? I don't think people realize the implications of, like, again, big air quotes, like removing DEI, as if it's something that you just take out of the classroom and it's gone. It is embedded into our profession, and it is required for students to succeed. Anyone who thinks otherwise is scared of someone they believe are othered succeeding.
Hey y'all, so Trump's Department of Education today decided to put up a DEI snitch line, a portal where people can report, instances of DEI or discrimination or divisive ideology or even indoctrination. So we thought it'd be really great for folks in Arizona to report instances of actual indoctrination.
Yes, I have 3 teachers at my school that I need to report for using DEI practices in the classroom. The first is Miss Garcia. She's got books in her classroom library that include characters from other countries. I know, and now all the kids have a diverse perspective.
Snitching at work is crazy. You're not even getting paid for that. You're not getting no bonus. They're not going to give you nothing extra. You're getting the same pizza as me. Why do you care about these people so much?
What do you think about DEI?
I don't think DEI is anything. It's just fake.
People have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. But I know what I'm talking about. I have a doctorate in the subject, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity simply means ensuring that a variety of perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences are represented.
First of all, DEI stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, right? So to me, we start by thinking, okay, what's the opposite of those things? The opposite of diversity is uniformity, right? Mm-hmm. The opposite of equity is inequity. And the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. And I don't know a lot of people who think we'd be better off if our lives had more uniformity, inequity, and exclusion, right?
It's okay if DEI goes away because we're just going to hire based on merit. You can't hire based on merit in a bigoted society.
If you had a crystal ball right now in front of you, what do you think schools will look like 5 to 10 years from now if current trends continue?
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to make a reference to a book I'm reading right now that gives a very clear picture. So I'm reading the sequel to a previous book. So Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, just an iconic book of the 20th century. And one of the things they talk about in like kind of the end times is that like religion comes back into school and students are learning more about religion than they are about actual life and academia skills. And that's what I envision could potentially happen if things keep going the way that they're going. I have a pretty negative outlook based on like what's going on in our government today. And I hope that what I'm saying is completely wrong and that some corner will turn and we will not head that direction. But I really do feel like, especially with the references you made earlier about like Bibles being in classrooms, the 10 Commandments have to be posted. I just feel like that's the direction that we're going, that's going to be more of the focus rather than setting students up for success.
You dealing with little ones, not elementary, but they're little.
Yeah.
They're not adults. What does it mean for you to be a teacher right now during these politically volatile times?
That made me cry a little bit. Okay. I think I have the most incredible, awesome, and pressure-filled responsibility to be the best example of a rational, critically thinking, open-minded adult that I can possibly be. And the reality is that's not what humans are at all times. But because of everything going on in the world and the way it affects my students, I think it is so important that they have a safe place to be their truest selves, that they have a safe place to explore, and that they have an adult who will listen to them without judgment, regardless of what they believe, regardless of what politics they bring in that are either their family's politics or their own held beliefs. It's so overwhelming to me that this responsibility to help students have these conversations and help them have these experiences falls on me as an educator, because they might not feel the way, or they might not be able to express that way they feel at home. And I think, unfortunately, that means I take on sometimes more of like a parental role than I want to. And believe me, I'm really happy to do these things, like so happy, because I did not have them as a child in my own house or at my school. I had maybe one or two teachers. And so that's kind of like the thing I live by is like, I want to be the teacher I did not get when I was growing up. And I think it's just an awesome responsibility, and I'm honored to have it. And I can only hope that other teachers treat it with this same care and respect that I do.
Give me an example of what trauma-informed practices are in today's times.
Okay. The simplest way I can kind of explain it, I guess, is never assuming that the behavior is the end goal of the student. The behavior is a result of a need or an attention that is not being met. And so to be trauma informed means that you are not judging the student based on the behavior until you have more information about what the student might be lacking otherwise. So seeing the student as a whole and not an isolated incident is the best way I can explain it.
Trauma-informed practice. Trauma is the experience and effects of overwhelming stress. It is often the result of a survival response to threats. Trauma can be caused by many different events outside a person's control, such as systemic or interpersonal violence, neglect or abuse, and historical or intergenerational trauma. Everyone responds to trauma in different ways. For some, the effects of trauma can subside over time or once they are safe. For others, it can have lasting adverse effects on their mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being.
There's not a one-size-fits-all for literally anything we do in education. So for people to think that like this is the right thing to do and like this is like, again, air quotes, equity, that's not what that is. Like true equity is seeing people where they are and using that information to better inform the decisions we make moving forward. I think taking that away is a massive disservice to the student and honestly to the educator as well, because that means we don't get the background information that we so desperately need to properly serve a student moving forward. We're going to continue to have behavior issues if we don't see the whole picture and we only see a snapshot. And that's not something that I want to deal with. So I'm going to continue to view the entire student as a person, not as an isolated incident.
What kind of support do teachers and students need most right now?
Oh my gosh. Okay, the simple answer is staff, more teachers, so we can have smaller class sizes, more counselors so students can have support. We need full-time health workers in the office so that if students need something, it is not our secretaries who are administering information. And even though they might be like trained to do that, that's not their job. And it's not necessarily my job either, except when I go on a field trip. And so I'm trained for it. But like, there's just so many places that we are lacking adults. And like the ratio of adult to student should be so much different than it is right now. Yeah, we are definitely cutting corners on how we take care of students. And I think a lot of times people view it as, you know, these educators are professionals, like they should be able to handle it. But a lot of times the people who are making these decisions are not the people that are in the room with me, witnessing what I go through every day. And no matter if I have the most fabulous class of 35 students or if they're all like little terrors, it's still stressful. It's a different stress, but it's still stressful. And I don't think that's understood, that like quantity versus quality is essentially the summary of all of that.
Milo, what gives you hope in this moment in our country?
Youth, truly. I see every day the way that students are combating the things that they are taught, the things that they see, and they're asking the best questions and are trying to grow and change and maybe get away from some things that they are learning at home that at school they may feel safe to express. I'm pretty active outside of school in terms of like going to protests and volunteering and things like that. And I love when there are just so many young people because it gives me faith that the next generation is willing and capable of continuing the fight, and they will fight in a way that is better than the way I have fought. And I feel very confident about that.
If you could send a message to the Trump administration making decisions about the future of education, what would you want them to hear?
My visceral reaction, honestly, is I don't think I'd say anything. I think it would fall on deaf ears. I think it would be more painful for me to come up with this beautiful impassioned speech and to say it to someone who is not going to listen to me. I truly am a believer in being an activist at the local and state level. I think going to like the government, like in Washington, D.C. and like pleading my case and things like that would fall on deaf ears. I really do not think that's where the change is. I think the change that can be affected is smaller than that. And we need to focus on our own ecosystem, our own direct surroundings, and take care of our communities before we start thinking of the country as a whole. Not that anyone should feel like abandoned or left out or things like that. And I think of people in like particularly red states or states where they are not in the same position I am in. And I do acknowledge that privilege constantly. And I think that's where change happens, is ground floor, grassroots kind of change. And I think that's reflected. I don't have the name of the research. I just looked at this last night. I wish I could remember, but there is research that shows every new generation is supposed to be smarter than the last. That's what we're going for. The research shows that Gen Z might be the last generation for a minute that is actually smarter than the previous one. Gen Alpha is not showing the signs that that's the case. And I think a lot of that has to do with quantify education because we are trying to compete with someone else. And now we don't necessarily have that. And so the effort isn't going into making it better. And I do feel like we're at fault for the people, the humans we produce in the public education system.
Well, thank you, Milo.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. As a band teacher, I got to ask, what is your favorite song to teach the kids?
Ooh. I'll just name the one that we're working on right now in my 8th grade band. It's called Arabian Dances, and it's really, really fun because each section gets kind of a little feature and we're all clapping and they get to woohoo and cheer for each other. And that just kind of encapsulates everything I feel about music. It's just supporting each other and having so much fun and falling in love with something and learning a new skill. And it's the best feeling in the world. So Arabian Dances, that is what we're playing right now. That's one of my favorite things.
And everyone has a part to play, just like in education.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today discussing these hot topics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Red Pens and Red Flags. This podcast series samples multiple public education professionals from different roles in schools. This includes teachers, administrators, special education, paraprofessionals, and language specialists.